What's guys, and this is Reviewers Realm. So if you guys watched the previous episode, I start the versus type of like series, like a mini series on this, where I basically do reactions and do my reactions to like versus. Obviously, if you guys went to go check that video, which will be in the description. Frostbite 1 from the Mountain Dew versus Mountain Dew Original. And I'll be doing more Mountain Dew versus series. But today, guys, we're going to be doing Disjointed Season 1, which is also called Part 1. Netflix is calling them parts. I'm just like, it's not parts. It's just a series. You can't call it. Unless you're saying it's like a movie, like a mini movie series, then it'd be parts. But if it's a television series, then it's seasons. But Season 1, Episode 1, Omega Strain, the employees at Roos Alternative Carrying Marijuana Dispensary are passionate about life, love, and pot. But mostly pot. This episode was just like trying to introduce all the different type of characters, trying to introduce like the security guard, like yeah, Carter. There's Travis, and then I think in this episode they basically actually no, I think Dink and Dabby get into episode 2. And I think this one was just basically trying to introduce like to show how it's gonna be, and to show that like Chuck Lorre can do other types of shows than 2.5 Men. But yeah, the thing that I find actually interesting about this show, the whole entire show, not just this episode, is that it has like mini ads inside of the show. So like when you're high, and it's a good advertisement marketing skill for like the guys. They're just like, well, what is stoners like? Advertisements in their fucking show. What the fuck? Like what? So you can trick them to actually feel like they're watching a fucking, like they're watching cable when they're really watching the show that you put a advertisement inside of it. But yeah, that was just all of season or episode 1. I mean, episode 2, Eve's Bush, which was a funny name, and you're gonna figure out that I think most, if not all, of the title, like episode titles, are just the strain of the day titles. Because this one was called Eve's Bush, and they were just like, I love like the compliment that they were talking about, like, oh yeah, go get Eve's Bush. It has not been penetrated by men, not even been touched, and it was just like a huge bush of weed. It was just like they called it Eve's Bush, and I was just like, okay, that's pretty interesting. But the summary is after neighboring business lodges a former complaint against the dispensary, 2 of Roof's most loyal customers launch a pro-pot protest. And this is where Dink and Dabby gets introduced. They're like the 2 characters that are side extra characters that are like, they're like main side extra characters that are like the what the fuck characters. Like 2.5 Men had it. And then I guess this show has it. I mean, it's created by the same guy. I wouldn't be surprised if they basically did a crossover. That'd be kind of cool, Disjointed and 2.5 Men. But yeah. So Taekwon Doug basically is the extra neighbor. He doesn't like to smoke any marijuana because or do any types of drugs, because he likes to do the martial arts skills. And so he basically just complains that like if the pothead people are going to be smoking into the parking lot, that he's going to do a complaint. And so Dang and Dabby basically do a protest, and they were like, no motherfucker, no motherfucker. And then that's what got to the next episode, for like at the end of the episode, Taekwon Doug basically disses weed, and then like Ruth just basically says, you can diss me, but you disrespecting marijuana, I'm gonna beat your ass. And then that was whenever she basically started fighting him. And then episode 3, Retherford B. Hayes. And this got me caught, because Retherford basically is my last name, but with an E instead of a U. But yeah, the summary is that Travis and Olivia come to an understanding. Dink and Dabby land an unexpected endorsement, and Carter opens up about his past. So basically what happens is Travis basically talks to Olivia about like his relationship status with her that he wants to have, because his mom basically starts talking about like, oh, why don't you get laid with Olivia? And he's just like, maybe like maybe. And so yeah, and they also get Ruth out of jail, and then Dink and Dabby just basically just do I think this is the episode when they basically become the endorsement of Ruth's alternative caring. But yeah, and then Carter basically just talks about like his PTSD whenever he was in Iraq. Which was kind of a sad moment inside. It was like those moment where it's in comedy where it's a sad moment. And then Estra Stricken, oh gee, I can't say that name. It's like a German name, but it's for a Kush, and they talk about that in the strain of the day like segment inside of it. But the summary is a legendary pop photographer has Pete in a tizzy. Wait, what? But meanwhile, Ruth has a change of heart about her son's love life. So Ruth basically just decides that she doesn't want like grandbabies, and then like Pete just basically he likes the photographer that's a marijuana photographer, but he then like realizes that he photoshopped his photos of his plants, and then he gets really pissed off. And then the whole entire episode is just him trying to figure out how to be able to get his plants back, how to get revenge on this dude. And then the whole entire episode is just like doing just Olivia having like obsessions over just what this dude, this photographer. And then that was it's not like an important episode, it's just like, you know, good for comedy and stuff because they have a lot of good jokes in there. And then Schrodinger's pot is the name of episode 5. And Pete, in the summary, is Pete and Doug share a love of candles. Jenny makes a painful phone call, and Travis takes issue with Ruth's Scrabble tactics. So this was the episode where they were just like peer pressuring Travis to basically come in there and do like Scramble, and they even did like a game thing, like they did like the standby. I forgot the name of the song, but it's the Home of the Brave, the thing that's played in every single American game, like in an American sport game. But yeah, and then Pete and Doug basically Pete starts taking lessons from Taekwon Doug, and then they basically just start talking about like, you know, you can get high without trying to do drugs, and which is actually absolutely true. Like there's 2 types of high that you can get. This is your body elements, your enlightenments, and then you can get high from, you know, a drug enlightening you to, you know, blah blah blah. Word is simple, don't do drugs, kids. You could do marijuana, but that's considered like a drug and non-drug. Just don't do hardcore drugs like meth or blah blah blah. And then Donna Weed is the name of the episode 6, and while attending a funeral for a famed pot activist, Ruth imagines what Travis might say at her funeral when the time comes. And this was like a messed up episode because it was kind of cool episode because I think the actors who did this actually smoked, because there's no way they fucking CGI'd that shit. But like it was pretty cool because she went to a former activist's like, you know, his funeral, and it was her friend, and then she basically just, you know, starts to wonder what would Travis say at her funeral, what would he say like to be able to do this. And then the whole entire episode, you know, she's just like trying to figure out what the fuck's going on. And then basically Jenny basically figures out that like she's starting to just, you know, realize that what she's doing is going to piss off her parents because of, you know, some stuff. And then episode 7, Prom Night, is the episode, and Ruth worries that she could be losing Pete to a rival. Olivia and Carter help Jenny track down a handsome consoler. So this episode was kind of pretty cool. I liked their segment of the old strain of the day type of segment. But Ruth basically finds out that Taekwon Doug is basically taking lessons with Pete, or giving lessons to Pete, and then she basically is worried that like he's going to just like betray her. And then the whole entire episode she's like, rip my heart out, take my chest, just use your skills, and she's being a drama queen all the time. But then like she basically just comes to heart that she comes to, you know, facts that like she can't change him going with Taekwon Doug, and that's just the truth that she realizes. And then episode 8, Poyong Yang Green, is the episode. that's a tongue twister. So the summary is Carter seeks advice from Ruth, and Jenny comes clean with Pete. Travis brings his new girlfriend to the dispensary, much as to Olivia's annoyance. This episode, basically Travis brings a new girlfriend, and I don't know if it is to annoy Olivia or piss off Olivia, but she was pretty hot, and then he was just imagining like this whole entire rap segment of him just rapping, and it was pretty cool. But yeah, Carter actually goes to Ruth about his PTSD and actually like the different types of things why he should do it, and she recommends him to a psychologist, and she tells him that he's a security guard, and because of the psychological stuff, and a security guard, because a security guard has a gun, that's not a good idea. So he gets mad at Ruth, and then he apologizes for Ruth at the end, and then they basically just she gives him a word search book, and they make up. And then this is the episode 9 and episode 10 is where shit gets really interesting. So the name of episode 9 is Olivia's Shitballs. So the summary is Travis impresses Ruth with his new business savvy, and Olivia introduces a new delicacy to the dispensary, and Pete gets an otherworldly visitor. So in this episode, Ruth is basically talking about like her money stash. And then Travis basically thinks that, like, you know what, let's buy some, let's buy some gravestones, and then just like whenever we need the money back, sell the gravestones for a higher more price or the same exact price. She said, oh, that'll be perfect. And then Olivia basically introduces this ingredient called shitballs, and then they just figure out, oh, so what's basically just like, put pot in it and it will sell out like a banger. Eventually does, and then Olivia gets high at like very fucking high, and they're all just sitting around, and Pete basically was going to kill and murder his plants because he thought he was talking to them and that they were real, but it was all psychological. And then he basically just like gets a visit, quote unquote visit, from Mary Jane, the spirit embodiment of marijuana, and she fucks him basically. It was a weird scene, but yeah. And then episode 10 is where like shit hits the fan, because this is the season finale. It's called The Worst, and the summary is, wow, Ruth and Travis experienced the worst day of their lives. Dank and Debbie come to a short-lived realization. And when it's called short-lived, they don't basically exaggerate on that part, because Dank and Debbie are up in the, rooftop, they can't find a lighter, they can't find a match, they can't find anything to be able to light their joints, so they spend all day basically not being high, while Travis and Ruth basically just get, evaded and basically get a pat down by the DA, and they basically take all their money and they take all their weed, and then the DA officer basically threatens Ruth that if she doesn't give up the safe of all the money, that he'll put Travis away for 10 to 20 years or 5 to 10 years, because and the previous episode was like a Christmas episode, and apparently Dank and Dabby gave away some free joints to minors that were not efficient age. So because of that, the DAA took that as a serious offense, and because it was their weed, they basically said that, you know what, this is your weed, that you can't do this. Ruth eventually gives in, and she basically gives them all their money, but the DA raided that shit. Like, they raided that motherfucking shit. Like, there was nothing gone, and there was an end segment to end the season where Ruth was just singing and she was just playing her guitar, and then they all smoked Pete's weed that he smoked, or he basically grew, and they said that it was the fucking best weed that they ever had smoked ever. And instead of calling it the best, they called it the worst, in the memorial of like the worst day that they ever had. And I was just like, that's pretty interesting. And then they had like a weird segment at the end, and then where Chuck Norris and like the other guy who created this show were just like high as fuck, and they were looking at the TV, and they were just like, oh look, we got guacamole, and they're just like, oh, but we have chips, and he's like, yeah, but we don't got no guacamole. And I'm just like, dude, that's not what it's like to be high. And trust me, I've smoked a couple of times, so it's not what it's like. But yeah, that was my review and my take on Disjointed Season 1, also known as Part 1. But if you guys want more, and if you guys want Season 2, then go ahead, subscribe to the fucking red button up below, turn on the notifications, be a JRayPics here. I salute you guys out, round the dynamic dreams, and I will see you guys later. Be you always a slump.